So there's been another announcement in regard to something that I think arguably has somewhat ties to Jasmy. And let me explain what I mean by this, even though nothing I say is financial advice, and even though I'm not telling anyone to do anything, and even though this is just purely my perspective. So despite Jasmy only recovering around 0.5% in the past week, Jiangshin actually made a recent post. Now, of course, we know that Jiangshin is a layer 2. It's actually an incubation project under Jasmy, and it's really focused on AI. But besides that, Jiangshin announced that they have launched its GPU-sponsored program for something called EVO, so Evo, DVO, so Evo Devo Tech, which is a startup originating from Tokushima University in Japan. Now, we do know that Jasmy has a very massive presence when it comes to Japan. It's actually one of the first projects within its space that is considered to be compliant in Japan. So that's very impressive. And even because of that, some people give it the nickname of the Bitcoin of Japan. It isn't, but you know what? It's a nickname, right? But besides that point, though, I think this right here is pretty impressive because Jiangshin now caring about startups, I think that's pretty impressive to me. And of course, if let's say Jiangshin has more popularity, if it has more notoriety, I think if anything, it's only a hypothetically a good thing when it comes to Jasmy. Why not? I think that if let's say Jiangshin does pretty okay, I think it's only natural that some of it may trickle down to Jasmy. And if let's say Jasmy does pretty okay and some of it trickles down to Jiangshin, it wouldn't surprise me either. After all, again, Jiangshin is a layer 2. It's an incubation project under Jasmy. But even besides that point, though, people like to tell me that, okay, but what is this really going to do? Well, I think this right here kind of showcases the presence when it comes to Jiangshin, and I think this sets a good precedent when it comes to Jiangshin because it showcases that they do even care about startups. But even besides that point, though, Jasmy, people like to tell me, but it's not really doing much. Yeah, okay, I get that, but at the same time, the market also hasn't been doing the best. So what, Jasmy is going to go on a random rally of its own? That sometimes usually isn't the case if the project is not a microcap, which Jasmy clearly isn't. But not to mention, I think sometimes what people often overlook when it comes to Jasmy is that the team, when it comes to Jasmy, historically, I've seen many people who used to work at places like Sony. So that's really impressive. And keep in mind, again, Jasmy becoming the first project of its kind, basically, to achieve legal compliance in Japan, that I think sets also very amazing precedent because that's not that easy to achieve. And of course, I briefly mentioned this in the beginning of the video, but I just want to mention this again to kind of emphasize my point when it comes to that. I think that is really just impressive. I mean, the first of its kind of impressive again at the end of the day. Now, personally for me, I've been to Japan many times. I think it's very amazing. I even got this watch from Japan. My dad's cousin actually graduated from Waseda University. That's very impressive in my opinion, that university. Also on top of that, my auntie actually has been living in the city of Nara, which is very close to Osaka. But again, Nara, it's in Japan. But she lives in the city of Nara, which is the capital of the Nara prefecture. But besides that, she's been living there for over 30 years, so oftentimes I hear stories about Japan and stuff like that. So I just think it's very impressive when it comes to what Jasmy is just fundamentally speaking. And furthermore, when I take a look at it, people like to tell me that, but who cares about all this? Jasmy still isn't doing the best. But what happens if the market sentiment were to change? Let's keep in mind, Jasmy, we've seen historically what it did, especially in 2024. Reached around a 2 billion market cap. So we're around 7 times lower than that. And I would arguably say Jasmy is better right now, fundamentally speaking, than before. I mean, if I take a look at it, right, I think the fundamentals currently, again, is just better than back in 2024. Yet Jasmy did better at that time. We're going to compare it to right now. So what would happen if, let's say, the sentiment went back to that point, yet Jasmy, now with better fundamentals, kind of returned to that sentiment? If it maybe kind of exceeded what it did in the past, I don't know if it would surprise me. But besides that point, Jasmy's focus when it comes to data storage, I think, is cool and impressive. But at the same time, I think Jiangshin was a real sort of game changer in regard to Jasmy because that right there kind of opened the doors, so to speak, for Jasmy to just really have this arguable narrative in regard to AI. Because now we take a look at, again, Jangshin, like I mentioned before, being an incubation project under Jasmy that's really focused on AI. That right there indirectly gives Jasmy, I think, a lot of AI exposure in that sense, right? It gives it a lot more notoriety when it comes to that space. Now, granted, Jangshin has his own token, but I'm just saying, still, if let's say Jangshin has some popularity, I don't know why that'd be a bad thing when it comes to Jasmy. Not to mention, if we take a look at AI, we've seen it do very well when it comes to stocks lately. But we just haven't really seen it when it comes to the space too much, as of late at least. But what happens if there is a change in sentiment? What happens if that capital rotation hypothetically does happen? Jangshin is waiting right there. It doesn't have to chase later on. It doesn't have to try to rearrange the narrative later. No. And by extension, I think Jasmy arguably is also kind of waiting right there because, again, Jangshin does have close ties to Jasmy. In that sense, like I mentioned before, being an incubation project under Jasmy. But even besides that point, I feel like when it comes to Jasmy, it has sort of a couple of pathways, right? If, let's say, the data storage narrative were to pick up, Jasmy's waiting right there. If the AI narrative were to hypothetically pick up again when it comes to this space, Jangshin is waiting right there, and by extension, Jasmy is also kind of maybe tagging along to a certain extent. So it really is kind of in the situation where if either the AI space or the AI sentiment really gains traction again when it comes to the space, then I don't see why it's bad for Jasmy. And then also when it comes to data storage, I don't see why it's so bad either. So it's just waiting on two market sentiments hypothetically becoming a thing. But if one doesn't and the other one does, vice versa, or let's say both, again, in any case, Jasmy's just kind of waiting right there. So that's what I like. I mean, I don't like it if a project chases later on. I'd like to rather just prepare, wait for the projects that I want to wait for, and that's it. I'm not trying to chase trends. That's not my style. So when it comes to Jasmy, okay, sure, it may not be doing the best, but it reminds me a little bit of like what SanDisk was doing a couple of years ago. Not to say that this could ever become that massive, but I'm just saying when it comes to SanDisk a couple of years ago, it wasn't really considered anything that cool or interesting by many people. But then once that AI narrative really became a thing, we saw what it did. So when it comes to Jasmy, sure, as of right now, when it comes to the space, no one really cares too much about data storage, and also AI when it comes to this space hasn't really become such an impressive narrative again. But what happens if it does? That's the thing. So I'm just waiting. That's personally what I'm doing. But I'll be sure to make more updates moving forward. So hopefully y'all stay tuned for that. I want to say thank you for watching. It's been Lee the Captain, and hopefully I'll see y'all in the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.